Welcome to the Real Assets, Real Leaders podcast, a show where we meet with leaders from across the energy, infrastructure and real asset space to talk through their careers, their motivation and their leadership ethos. My name is Joshua Fowkes, founder of SONAURA Metric Executive Search. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Real Assets, Real Leaders podcast. Thanks for joining us again for another week. And we have the pleasure of being joined by Ed Pateman-Jones for this week's episode. So Ed, thanks very much for joining us. Do you want to give us a 30 to 60 second introduction to yourself?
Yeah, thanks very much, Josh. Really nice to be here. Thanks for having me. So I'm Ed Pateman-Jones. I'm Sonora Energy's CEO. So I look after Sonora Energy's commercial activity and also oversee the business internationally.
Great. So we're going to talk through a lot of things, Ed. We're going to talk through your background and your career. We're going to talk to how you've got to where you are. But I want to spend some time starting off just talking a bit more about Sonora Energy. So do you want to give us, I guess, almost the elevator pitch to what it is that you're building and why it matters?
Yeah. So Sonora is renewable energy developer specializing in off-site private wire renewable energy projects. So what is that? So off-site is any renewable energy project that's outside of an industrial power user's premises. Private wire means that our projects, rather than connecting to the grid, we connect directly to industrial power users behind the meter, which means they get the benefit of an on-site solution, typically something like rooftop solar would be the most vanilla option they would have. But we give them the scale that means that rather than it being a bit of a PR exercise or a very small scale, low impact option, actually what we do gives them a really, really big impact. Rather than just being a PR exercise, they get to decarbonize 25 to 30% of their sites' energy usage or electricity usage and save a much bigger amount of money from our lower cost of power versus their grid power.
Great. So how does that compare to the way that, let's say, industrial companies might typically source energy? And I guess what is broken about the way that often parts of the industry work, and how do you kind of come in and fix that?
Compared to how a power user would typically buy energy, I suppose the first thing to say is we don't want to necessarily fully replace what they already do. So at the moment, they buy their power through the grid, which means that their power has many different components of charges in their bill. You've got the wholesale cost of power, then you've got grid and transmission charges, climate change taxes and levies, all in addition to that. 4 or 5 years ago, that might have been half of their bill was that additional amount over wholesale cost of power.
Wow.
So what we do, if we were exporting our power directly to the grid, we would get to sell it for roughly the wholesale cost of power. Because we're selling it to them, we get to sell it for a bit of a premium on that, which actually covers the extra cost of what we're doing as well. But that premium isn't the full amount of their grid charges. So actually we get to sell it to them for less than they would currently pay.
I see.
So at the moment, the power they buy from the grid is very expensive because of all those additional charges. We're able to improve that by giving them power behind the meter. We're not able to give them all their power behind the meter because we're a renewable energy developer and our power is intermittent by design. So about 25 to 30% of their power demand is what we typically aim for. You can't do private wire projects everywhere. You can only do them when the geographical regulatory environment works or the power usage on that particular site is enough. Where the cable route is not going to be too long. So what we would usually do with a power user is we'd look across the whole portfolio. They might have 20 sites internationally. We'd look for where they can do a project. We might come back to them and say, fantastic, it's 15 sites. But we might come back and say, look, it's only 3 of your sites in your whole portfolio. So step one is to do that. Then we go and look at where we could secure land to develop that project. And where there's an opportunity to do that, we can work out economically whether we're going to be able to give them something compelling. Usually the answer is yes, if we're going to go to them and say that. So the reason why that's all a step one is because you can't do it everywhere. So sometimes power users will go advisor first. And what will happen is the advisor might say, you should do this at all these sites. And then they actually come to look at it and find out that they can't, or that they've been looking at the wrong solutions in the wrong places. So we have a real, can we do this approach first, and then tell them so they can almost skip the high level advisor route. So going back to what I said a minute ago on the portfolio approach, there's also a bit of a portfolio buying approach from the procurement teams at these power users. So we don't want to replace everything they currently buy. We fit into that solution. So step one is behind the meter private wire, if you can do it. Mm-hmm. Step two is something that the really big power users already do, which is usually about 55 to 65% of their power procurement, which is sleeve contracts through the grid. So that's also buying power from renewable energy projects, but at a much bigger scale via the grid. It's going to be more expensive for them because they don't have that behind the meter aspect to it, but it means they can get bulk securing of that power supply. And then the residual amount at the end, which is usually 15 to 20%, might be the energy certificates. So you save that to the end because there's rarely additionality associated with it. So you're not actually helping decarbonisation really. You're just buying certificates associated with power, which someone else might not be buying anymore, for example. Sure. So those are the three steps, and that's what we usually advise power users to do. So quite a long answer to that, but there you go.
No, that's great. That's great. I guess some of the questions that come from that. So typically, what kind of power user, what kind of customer might be an ideal client for Sonora?
Yeah, so we are agnostic to which sector we go to. So we don't typically mind. And actually, we're in a really, really nice situation for our business model at the moment where we can provide a project with a long-term power price which is forecast to be less than what they would currently pay to the grid. So we're in a very unique situation. We're in a very nice situation from medium to long-term outlook for the business where we don't get forced into some sectors. Having said that, post-COVID, post-Russian invasion of Ukraine, power price volatility has meant that governments have started to give even more cost-saving measures to some particular key industrial sectors, which is great for the countries that is occurring in to support those industries. However, for us, it does make that margin of saving that we can offer slightly lower, which means that the proposition is much more compelling for high energy cost sectors where their government are not giving them those energy cost breaks. So, for example, some food and drink manufacturing, that's true for cold storage logistics providers. They're not getting that tax break. Data centers being a very key one, very, very high energy costs, albeit they have such buying power that they're very capable and able to secure some very good energy procurement deals. But then we have the other sectors which the government is supporting, even metals manufacturing, buildings materials manufacturers, which do get those breaks. We're still able to offer them something that's lower than what they currently procure. The buying strategy of those power users will massively vary. So you get ones with huge procurement teams that are doing day trading who want something very specific for you and usually want from us and usually want to take almost all the risk off the table. So for them, we need to develop very big projects so we get the economies of scale that allow us to be more flexible with things like discount to market power prices. So rather than, we look at their overall all-in power price, we can offer a discount to that so that they've almost banked their cost saving for the full contract life. They might have lower savings up front versus the fixed price. But they're much more sophisticated and interested in doing that versus other power users that say, I want to secure a fixed price for 25 years and I'm very happy to just bank that price because it's a hedge for them. Sure. So there's a huge variation. And actually, even when you look at different countries, the motivations for power users are very different depending on whether the grid is dirty grid or not, what the power price is in that market, what the culture in that country is influences what contract they want. We've definitely seen that. And that's actually something that's been very surprising to us as a management team as we started on this journey, how much that would vary between countries based on the culture.
Okay, no, that's great. And you obviously mentioned being able to advise and prescribe different solutions to clients depending on their needs. Does that mean you are relatively technology agnostic when it comes to offering solutions?
The simplest possible solution we can do is ground mount solar. And because it's simple for us to do, it's quick for us to do, and it's relatively cheap for us to do. So we tend to lead with, is it economically viable and attractive for the customer for us to do that in this project? If we can confirm that, then we look at all the other stuff as well. So our leading technology is ground mount solar, but we have engaged power users and quickly determined, for whatever reason, maybe they've got a very big solar procurement contract, sleeve contract, that actually they don't want any more solar because they're already consuming lots of solar that's producing a lot in the day. So actually they want wind. So we look at wind as well, independently at that stage, but we also look at it in support of solar, and the two things aligned. Then we also look at more supporting technology to support that generation. So that could be battery energy storage or even heat energy storage. And we're looking to develop our product suite as we go. We don't want to get distracted because often you engage in a project and see there's so much opportunity here to do all these interesting things, but it's about replicability. How much can we do of exactly the same thing that we're now going to devote a lot of time to that particular product and that contract? We need to know that we can do it over and over again so that we can give customers the best possible price.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say, obviously, how long in are you now?
We're about 16 months in. We closed our initial investment round in 2023, December 2023.
Yeah. And we're gonna go and talk about that a fair bit more. But what would you say in those 16 months, kind of the appetite in the market has been for your solution, and is that maybe indicative of end users thinking a lot more about the prices of the power that they are purchasing?
Yeah, when I started having conversations with industrial power users much earlier in my career, maybe eight years ago, about at that stage it was about behind the meter energy storage and monetizing grid connections for them. This was a very new topic. So you got some power users that were really, really keen to be innovators and leaders who wanted to have some sort of behind the meter, usually on-site solution. Those were the pioneers. Now, I would say every single power user we approach in the UK understands what offsite private wire is. In France, it is very new. So it's almost where the UK was 3 or 4 years ago, where you could have a 20-minute conversation and then suddenly realize that the person actually still thinks you're talking about a sleeve contract, or they think you're talking about rooftop solar, and you sort of have to go, no, you've got it slightly wrong. This is what we're doing. Oh, wow. Okay, that sounds fantastic. Let's do that. So that's where we are in France at the moment. Germany is much more familiar with what we do. Having said that, they are more typically seeking a development services agreement where they fund the project themselves.
Okay.
And that's something to do with culturally, I didn't know this until we were doing this, that they seem to want to own a project and control it more. They're much more motivated by spending their company's own money on it. Don't ask me why that is, but it seems to be the way. So very often the very big power users, you'll approach them and they actually will already have secured land nearby themselves within the company for doing this exact doing this exact product. So yeah, it's interesting. There's definitely opportunity in all the markets that we're in. And actually we're looking to expand into new markets over the next 18 months. So yeah, some very positive signs in the market, which is great.
Good. And you mentioned obviously the UK, France, Germany. You're looking to expand. I mean, where's the ceiling, Ed?
So how do we pick the countries we were in the first place, and how do we pick the future countries we go to? So there was risk associated with going to these first 3 countries because we went to them without power users already having signed up. Our expansion into new markets is going to be very closely linked to where existing power users are already asking us to go to support the rest of their portfolio. So one of the reasons why Sonora, the USP of Sonora and why we created it the way we did is that we recognized that international power users very often have group central procurement, centralized procurement functions. And that means that person doesn't necessarily, who's managing that, doesn't necessarily have a a loyalty to any one particular country for their job. And therefore, it doesn't make sense to approach them and say, we are a UK operating private wire solutions provider, because they go, okay, fantastic. Who's going to go and do it for me in these countries? We say, we'll do it for you in all your countries. And that's why we have local teams where we're doing projects. So that was the whole reason why we set it up the way we did and went international straight away, so that we could be that partner for them. The thing that supports us going into new countries is usually a dirty grid. So if there is heavy decarbonisation or large-scale decarbonisation that is required for that power user to decarbonise because their current grid power is very, very dirty, coal power plants, for example, that's one motivating factor. The other one is very expensive power prices. And I suppose the third one is, where is their portfolio? So when we set the company up, we looked at where are these big industrial power users located, Germany being probably the major industrial manufacturing centre of Europe. Also very dirty grid. France was an interesting one. We saw lots of industrial manufacturing, slightly more spread out, high power prices, clean grid. Having said that, because the companies that we're approaching are international, they look at their overall group decarbonisation. So they're not necessarily that bothered that France has a clean grid. If you speak to a very France-focused power user, they might say, actually, our power is green because it's nuclear. So it's a different motivating factor in each time. So going back to your original question of where we're going next, we've had power users ask us to support them in 2 key countries. I won't say what they are yet because it might reveal where we might be expanding. But there are some very dirty grids out there with some very expensive power. And also some very big industrial manufacturing countries. So that might give you some clues about where we're going to go next.
Yeah, and lots of great opportunity then by the sound of things. And one of the things, you start in a new organisation, you're probably getting very good at kind of telling the story behind Sonora and telling your story a bit as well. I think I'll probably start, and I'm always fascinated with how people pick the names of their businesses. Is there a story behind that?
Yes, absolutely. So going back to the fact that we wanted to support power users internationally because there are centralized procurement functions, we wanted to make sure that when we approached those customers, that we didn't look like we were from one country, because it doesn't matter how much you say to someone, actually we operate in Germany. If your business is called, James Smith International Energy, then it sounds like you're from the UK. So we tried to come up with a name that would not make us be associated with any particular country. So started looking at the meaning behind different sounds within renewables. So Sona is obviously solar it's sun in German, and aura is ancient Greek for wind. So it literally is sun, wind.
I love that. That's great. And that kind of storytelling piece, I think, flows quite nicely into, well, it's a key component of how you raise capital as well, right? Investors want to buy into you. And I'd love to go into kind of that journey of capital raising. So you're backed by Eurazeo.
Yep.
Great. Tell me about kind of that process at the start of, okay, well, we want to raise capital. What was that like?
It's something I've had some experience for in the past. So I understand that journey of speaking to investors and doing those pitches, but I've also been on the other side of the table with developers coming to me as an investment manager looking to either sell projects or get investment into companies. I've also worked on the advisory side, helping other companies raise money. So I'm fairly familiar with that, which helped to understand how that process flows. One of the key things we did is we got a fundraising agent involved, and I would definitely recommend that to anyone looking to raise a decent amount of money, because they really do help sculpt your story, remove the bits that aren't going to add value, focus in on the bits that are, but also be real with you and say, you're not going to get investment until you've proved this, for example. So the key thing for us, or the key reasons why I think we got investment, is the credibility of the management team. So, and it's one of the things we actually have to prove all the time when we speak to industrial power users now, or even landowners, because, they say, it's quite a young company. Why would we do business with you? And we show our track record of everything we've done as a management team. The 4 guys in the management team are all different backgrounds within renewables and finance and infrastructure. So we've all done very different things at some large scale, and we all have a completely different skill set. So the makeup of that management team was critical, and I think really that's what Eurazeo invested in. I think for us to hit the sweet spot of being something they were interested in, we also had to fit their fund mandate of what they could invest in, but also what they believed was a growing sector. And I mean, I think they've obviously got it all right. But the key thing, I suppose, that's different, that I can't take responsibility for necessarily, is that I think they've also got it right with the sector. And there's a lot of supporting factors for exactly what we're doing, the business model and the wider sector within Europe, especially. So those were the key things that I think we hit the sweet spot on all of them. We also had to approve some early engagement with some key power users to show they're interested and they would buy this product from us. So, yeah.
And obviously from the investor perspective, from Eurazeo, obviously they've got a responsibility for their own backers, and they're going to invest the fund, and its value creation is very much at the top of their list. How do you fit into that? And maybe as well, you could talk a bit about what does the relationship and the ongoing kind of dialogue look like between you and the team?
Yeah, so given we were very early when they invested in us, literally just starting. When they gave us the money, I was the only person employed in the business. And then over the next few months, a few more people joined. They needed to make sure that their investment was de-risked as much as possible. So actually what we agreed with them, and I think what's quite typical for a business at this stage, is milestone releasing of investment. So we know what our overall commitment is. And then we know what key goals we have to reach along the way to release the next amount of money. That takes us on our journey towards the construction funders, infrastructure funders, which are much lower risk, lower return capital, which we're on our way to getting to that bigger investment round now. So
yeah, no, fantastic. That's great. So it would be really good to just before we move on to some of the earlier stuff in your career, just talk a little bit about your team, because obviously the team, as you said, is a big part of that. How big's the business at the moment? How many people are in the team? And is that something that, as you grow, I imagine you will also look to grow? Yeah,
so we are 22 people across the 3 countries. We've got an office in London, Paris, and Berlin. The founding team is 4 of us, and it's 4 guys, which is something we've been very conscious of from the start. That we want to make sure that we bring in a very culturally and gender diverse business, and it's something we focused on a lot. So we're probably roughly half female, male, which is obviously fantastic, and it really does influence the culture that we've got. Because we had an experienced 4-person management team to start off with, we started hiring very junior to support what we could do. As the business has grown, that's obviously not completely sustainable because we have to do a lot of middle management. So we've started now to bring in some middle managers. Our projects have reached the stage where we're quite heavily into development now, and the skill set that we hired initially was basically origination and deal creation. Now we've got these projects successfully to the point where they're being developed in detail, the very intense process. We're bringing in project managers with a lot of experience doing this or doing similar projects, so that we can execute what we've said we're going to do. So that's the phase we're in at the moment. Very exciting to be growing that team. Also very exciting to be bringing in some really key expertise, because it relieves some of the or it removes some of the obligation for the founding team to be involved in every decision, so that we can take a step back and look to things like, how do we grow that market, or what can we focus on there? Maybe we've taken our concentration off that because we've been too involved in that deal. So I'm excited for that growth that we're about to go through, and also excited to grow the commercial teams. So in France and Germany, we've been a bit softer in testing those markets as we've entered them versus the UK, which I had much more familiarity with. And now that we've seen the positive signs, we've got projects through heads of terms, and we're on our way to developing projects in both those countries now. We've had that reassurance that the market is wanting to do what we do. And so now we're going to grow those commercial teams to really make sure that we take a big stake in those markets that we can then capitalize on.
I hope you're enjoying this week's instalment. This podcast is brought to you by Sonora Metric, an executive search firm facilitating leadership appointments across the energy, infrastructure, and real asset space. If you're looking to attract top-tier leaders to drive your value creation strategy and realize your growth plans, Sonora Metric's proven search strategy guarantee exceptional results, all whilst reducing the risk associated with leadership hiring. For more information, visit our website www.sondaandmetric.com. Let's rewind, shall we? Because obviously you are where you are, but there's been a journey behind that, Ed,
Yep.
and there's been a path that you've taken to get there that I'd really like to dig into. So, if you don't mind, can we go back to your earlier career and just talk? How did you first kind of get into the industry? What did you first start off doing professionally?
Yeah, so actually I'll go back even further than that. At university, so my undergrad, I did at Portsmouth. It was a real estate degree. So I think it was property development and surveying, a Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors degree. Within that degree, we had some modules which were focused on sustainability, sustainable building materials, but also even back then, and this was a fair amount of time ago now, we had some that were slightly focused on renewable energy. So how you could integrate that into residential units, for example. So my dissertation was on, I could have done it on anything. I think I was the only person that did it on this, but on my whole 200-person course, but I did it on microgeneration for residential units. Oh, wow. So I was going around the town asking people, despite government incentives to put renewable energy on your building, have you actually done it? Would you ever consider it? And the take up wasn't high, unsurprisingly. So that's where I first became interested in it. And then I went to a graduate scheme at Aberdeen Asset Management. But before the graduate scheme, I'd done an internship. And then I had a year gap before I started that grad scheme, where completely by chance, the property sustainability manager for the whole business went on maternity leave. So I had a year where I got to step into a managerial role out of university, where I was looking at a £20 billion property portfolio, trying to make sure it had been measured correctly from an energy performance certificate perspective. And that was fascinating because it was very much at the start of people understanding that they should care about this stuff, but it was a bit of an uphill battle a lot of the time. A fund manager, you cared about money ultimately. Now, of course, those two things are very linked, the sustainability and the money, but that was my first taste of it. Then I did the grad scheme at Aberdeen for 2 years, which was fantastic. A lot of good fun, and I recommend grad schemes to people. I suppose the thing that I didn't find in that is that on a grad scheme where you're doing lots and lots of rotations, you don't get to necessarily add value. It's an excellent training experience, essentially, and was very, very lucky to get that opportunity. At the end of those 2 years, I had the options to go into different teams within Aberdeen. And what I found was that I wasn't that excited about any of them. And so I started to look for some other options of what I could do. I really, really loved being in investment. Finance was fascinating to me. And also learned a lot that I wanted to capitalize on. So I almost didn't know this job was out there, but I started to search for what jobs there were. And I found a job at Ingenious, which was investment management in renewables. And it really was right at the start of the renewable energy industry. It felt like, there weren't that many jobs out there. And went through that interview process. And to be honest, I think they probably took a bit of a punt on me because I didn't know what I was talking about. And I think they sensed that I was really passionate about it and I was really excited to be there. So they took a punt on me. Big learning curve. And then within a few years, I got promoted every year. I was really, really excited by it and loved being there. Completely culturally different to working in a big fund manager like Aberdeen. a lot more responsibility. I was in a team of only 3 people. I could make a big impact, and that's something that I think is fantastic also about a startup environment where we are now, is you get to make a big impact on the business and you can see the value you create. So did that for 3, 4, 5 years, I think. And then one year as an investment manager, we spent the money that we had available. So we bought assets that we had available with it, for the money we had available within a few months. So we had a 6 to 9 month period to do something else. And so me and a colleague set up an internal energy storage platform where we started to go and speak to industrial power users and say, you've got this massive grid connection. You only need it for some of the year for your peak production times. The rest of the year, you're not monetizing this. You can monetize this with energy storage. And so I set to work and created a revenue sharing agreement model. That was my background, a bit of financial modeling, to basically work out how to install a battery energy storage system, make as much money from grid services as possible, or maybe some price arbitrage for the customer's power consumption as well, and then share that upside, share that profit that we made. We also looked at some things like rooftop solar and some energy efficiency, even voltage optimization, to install a much wider on-site solution. So we were looking at talking to people like big water utilities in the UK. From there, I then went into, that was my first foray into the engagement with industrial power users. So quite a long time ago, and very lucky that I've almost luckily fell into that specialism in that engagement. So I've spoken to thousands of power users now and done that pitch so many times, which is great. So then from there, I went into decarbonisation advisory, where I was helping industrial power users know what solutions they should install on their site and what would help them decarbonize the most, what would help them make the biggest financial saving. At the same time as also advising new technology providers where they could deploy their assets or deploy their technology and link those two things together. And then also speaking to big fund managers or banks about where they could deploy their capital. So bringing those 3 things together to create projects. And then that was when I was at Ikigai and I was a commercial director, sort of creating that overall package. And then from there, I've also worked as a co-developer and developer in this sort of space. So that all helped me come to the conclusion of the idea of what Sonora could be. So on that decarbonisation advisory journey, it became really obvious that industrial power users were familiar with their issues and what the solutions could be, but they were very often doing really, really vanilla rooftop solar, which was fantastic. They understood it. They would have some impact, but it was a PR exercise to an extent for lots of them. And what would the best solution be for them, really, if you didn't have any limits for the project? That would be the same product they used to. So solar, really established, almost foolproof, rarely fails technology. Shouldn't say things like that, but I mean, it's true these days. Banks get behind it for very low cost of capital. So look at something they're familiar with, the technology, but then look outside of their premises to give them a really, really big solution. If you could do that, then actually you'd satisfy lots of their needs. And so that's what Sonora is. So hopefully it's working and they seem to be interested in it. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that strikes me there is that transition from being in maybe more traditional finance and then looking to move into something more renewable energy focused, but much smaller. I guess there's probably an element of risk from your perspective. And I think people are early on in the career, maybe you're with a big established business like Aberdeen, you're thinking, okay, it does a lot of good things for me, but there's maybe a bit of an itch that it isn't scratching. And yeah, I mean, what would you say to maybe people at that stage of their career thinking, well, do I take that risk? Do I step out into something which maybe is a little bit unknown, but potentially has more of a reward as well?
Yeah, it's hard to answer this question without thinking about what I want, right? Because it's a very unique thing for people in their careers as to what they want to pursue and why they want to pursue it. So if you're very financially motivated, I think you could stay in one of those sorts of jobs at a big fund management house and know that you're going to make a very good income for your whole life. unless you do something majorly wrong, you'll probably be there forever without necessarily great difficulty. You might not ever get fully pushed. That's not the investment banking world. Fund management's a bit, good hours, et cetera, et cetera. So a very good life. But it depends if that's what you want, right? So for me, I'm not as motivated by the finances as I am motivated by fulfilling my potential. So for me, it's more about, do I think I can get the joy out of my career that I want in that situation, or do I need to go elsewhere to get that? And whilst that was a fantastic environment for some people, it probably wasn't for me. And I don't actually think I fit into it as much as I don't think they fit into me. I don't think I fitted into it. I wasn't necessarily the same as some of the very stable, focused people who wanted to do that as their career. So when I went to Ingenious, the culture, despite being in investment management, was so different, and I think that might have been because it was renewables and also media they had as part of their company. Because it was a new asset class, I think the people that had gone into it personalities were very different. The teams were very small. And as I said earlier, because we could create real value ourselves, it meant so much more to me. And I was so much more into it. Not necessarily because it was also better money, if I'm honest. So I would say to someone, think about what actually motivates you. And I mean, we can talk about this in a minute with our staff now. It's not necessarily money, even if you think that you like some nice things and you like to have a good life with some money. It's almost become surprising to me as I've got older that isn't necessarily true for me. And I kind of thought it was actually early in my career, and it's not true. So.
And it sounds like all that's played, a big impact on what is your first time as being a CEO. Which is obviously a new position for you to be in, and an element of you, I guess, learning the ropes in that role in a slightly different capacity. What are the things that have come naturally to you? What are the things that maybe have been a bit harder and you've had to learn along the way?
I've had this conversation with friends and family over the last year or so, and it's difficult to say this part without it sounding like I'm trying to big myself up too much. But I feel more comfortable in this role than any role I've ever had. And I suppose it's because some of the things that people might associate with a stress in a job, I don't feel them in this scenario. So making key decisions or how many things you have to think about, I'm very comfortable with that. And I suppose the thing that's given me the freedom to feel like that is an excellent management team. Having a founding team around me that are experts in their individual things that they do and contribute to the company means that I get to focus on the things that I want to focus on and also where I can add value. So I'm not distracted by, looking at the detail of legal contracts because we've got an excellent general counsel. Our CFO is background in investment banking, so he knows what he's doing there. I don't need to get involved with it. On the project management side, we've got someone who's ex-oil and gas and huge decarbonisation hydrogen projects. So he knows what he's doing with project management. So I get to focus on commercial activity, which is essentially what I've done for the last 10 years. So that's just, it helps me do my role in a low stress environment well. So that's all come naturally. I suppose the bit that's, there have been challenges, and thinking about my personality, what's challenging for me is I'm quite a direct communicator, and particularly if you recruit very junior resource, sometimes you need to be quite sensitive about being direct. Having said that, I think that I would say our staff do appreciate direct feedback, and it's a key thing for me that I think you should always give direct feedback quite quickly. I'm amazed at the amount of people that let views fester, even in a management position, and don't tell someone until potentially it's even too late. I tell someone straight away. And to everyone's credit, everyone adapts very quickly. And I think they appreciate honesty. But what have I struggled with? I suppose that is something I'm very sensitive to because I know my personality and I know what I'm like. The management team have got some softer characters in there, which helps because they'll call me out if they think I'm being too direct, but also we use each other for certain scenarios, certain things we need to do. even if it's a communication with a client, we know where each other's strengths and weaknesses are, so we fill in the gaps for each other. So as an overall package, we can hopefully get as optimal as we want to be. But yeah, as individuals, of course, we've all got weaknesses. So
yeah, absolutely. And what is your view on, I guess, the culture that you want to build at Sonora? What are some of the kind of values that you want to instill across the business, and how will that reflect the type of people that you want to attract?
Really good question, because it's something we talk about an enormous amount, whilst also always checking ourselves and saying, are we spending too much time on this? We've spent a lot of time on it. I think we've got to a very good place at the moment, and the question goes back a little bit to what motivates people when you're asking me, the journey or my career. So one of the key challenges has been, how do we motivate our staff, and particularly the junior staff? You would think you could do it by money. I think most people would think you could do it by money, but we have been quite surprised that it's not as obvious as you would think. And actually, whilst money can work, it's what goes with the money that adds way more value, even for some of the senior positions we've got. And if I think about myself, it would be similar. Recognizing someone's what someone has contributed verbally or to the wider business, showing them that you appreciate them, actually does way more for the loyalty and motivation than just giving them a commission. And that's something that I've really had to work on. Devoting the time and spending the time to doing that when it doesn't create immediate obvious value. So you're going back to the question with Eurazeo, what's in our contract? Does me spending an hour today sitting down with people, telling them that I appreciate them and what they could work on, does that create immediate value? Hard to compute that it does, but I believe it does. And I think it's something that over the last 16 months, I've started to believe more and more, as we realize that the people under 25 or even late 20s are motivated by a culture. So going back to your actual question you asked here about culture, we think, of course, management often thinks this, we think we've created a very nice cultural environment where everyone is very happy, and someone left the business last week, not because for any particular reason other than they had to move back to the country they're from. And one of their parting remarks was, you guys have created a fantastic culture here and everyone is super happy. And they didn't have to say that because they were leaving the business, right? And we were asking for feedback. So we're quite proud of that. And I'd like to think that even in an interview process, people can sense that now when they meet us. So yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And I imagine obviously that plays into the type of characters that you want to kind of bring into the business, not purely money motivated, but actually wanting to do a good job for the client, to work well with the colleagues as well.
Yeah, so we've spent a lot of time on this recently, and our general counsel, COO, has spent a lot of time on putting this process together. We were doing recruitment as individuals, but with supporting people in the team, but realizing that whilst we were doing a good job and including lots of things in that process, we didn't have a standardized process that was the Sonora way of doing it. We've recently put in, documented what is our exact process, who gets involved at what stage. And now we've got a 3-stage process to make sure that we've covered off the specific skill set they've got. Can they demonstrate in an actual case study presentation example that, a 2-hour meeting with people interrogating them from the team or challenging them from the team, that they can do the job that we're recruiting them for, but also that they've got the right culture. So that's a separate interview or a separate part of the interview where we ask them we've got a big portfolio of questions we can ask them about their cultural fit, just to make sure that they're the right hire. We've had people that we've got a long way through the process with, and you think they would be excellent at the job, but I'm not sure how well they'll fit with the rest of the team. So you go in another direction. So
I'm particularly when you've got a team the size that you've got at the moment. That a mishire or somebody who comes in with the wrong attitude actually can have a significant effect on the culture, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. We it's one of the key things we've been talking about a lot recently is the commercial team and how we manage international projects it's very difficult to manage. It will evolve for the next 5 years, how we do it, especially as that team grows. But when we engage these stakeholders for massive industrial manufacturers, there's often the group procurement person who probably speaks English and possibly some other languages. In the in-country teams, like a site facilities manager on an industrial factory might not even speak English. And so that's why we have boots on the ground or commercial people in country who are that culture, not just speak their language, but are that culture. So we can use each other to take a deal forward with the key stakeholders. That means that on some projects or some portfolios, we've got multiple people managing a project. And that does become difficult to say, what do you pick up? What do you pick up? Is that your deal in that country, but the power user contact, you own it? You know, it basically changes in almost every scenario. We've built several of our standard protocol of how to do it, and within a day, there's a deviation for whatever reason. So that's something we've had to manage, and I've had to recently start devoting more time to it to make sure that everyone is motivated and people don't feel like they're being challenged from people in another country at the same level as them or more senior than them or whatever. So people management will increase for me, I think, as the business grows. and I don't mind that. You know, at the start, it was about getting involved in all the deals, and I'm still doing a lot of that where I'm needed to. But there will come a day when I'm only doing people management, and I'm aware of that, right? But that's part of the journey.
Yeah, no, definitely. And from my perspective, it's really encouraging to hear that approach around recruitment, because I often see that businesses, they really do that too late. And actually the culture starts to morph around them in unexpected ways without them ever intending it to be that way. And I think, you know, from what you said there, kind of 3-stage process, you've got clarity around what you're doing. You've got purpose behind why you're doing it. And I think pace as well is always important. And actually people come in knowing this is what's going to happen. This is the time frame it's going to happen. And ultimately gives you and them the best opportunity to be able to understand the other side and say, is this a good fit for us? Yeah.
And one of the things that we have recently started to do even more of is be really transparent with everyone around what's motivating the management team. So we're not discreet anymore at all about our investment status, what's in our contract, what we need to sign to get to the next stage. So everyone, you know, it's up on the wall in our office. Everyone knows exactly where we are against our milestones and what we need to achieve next, so that we can say, where someone says they're working on whatever, you say, is that going to contribute to what's on the board there to get you to the next part, you know? And everyone's financially motivated to get there as well. Everyone's a shareholder in the business. So we're all trying to build the business together, which I think is really key for creating a culture in a startup environment. You can't ask someone to deliver more for you or be on the same journey as you unless you, on paper, involve them in that, right? It would be naive to suggest they would commit as much as you if they're not also linked financially to you.
And that's a really interesting thing to discuss, actually. So was that a decision that you made quite early on in setting up the business?
Absolutely. Before the business was set up, I would always, even in massive companies, you know, I think it's important to motivate people with shares, albeit sometimes they probably find they might question how they can contribute to the value of the business within their role. In a business our scale, every single person can absolutely see the value they can deliver and how they can help us reach those targets. And last week I did a presentation to the whole company where we went through various lists of deals to just get people to come up to the front and say, I'm going to list these deals to you. You tell us, when are they getting delivered and what do you need to do to get them delivered? And every single person that could have an influence came up. And the message really there was about, this is down to you. Whilst we're all sitting here discussing this stuff, you can have a tangible impact on the business success, but also your own financial success. So let's go and do it.
And you'd be surprised, as there's obviously a lot of organizations who offer some form of kind of equity or shareholder kind of arrangement with their employees, but a lot of people that I speak to, or maybe, people who are on the market leaving companies, say, yeah, I've got this. I don't really know how it works though. I don't really know how I get paid out for it. I don't even know when I get paid out for it.
There's a bit of that. And I think, you sometimes do these presentations about the detail of these things, and you've got to accept that 50% of it probably doesn't necessarily get understood. But offer the opportunity for people to come back to you and ask questions if they want. It wasn't like you don't offer that. They can do that. But I think the key thing there is to concentrate on the core message of what you're trying to deliver, even if the actual detail isn't necessarily completely understood. They're trusting that we understand it. And if we're all motivated in the same way, then we're taking care of that part for them. Just the same way with the management team. I can trust them to get on with the things that they're doing because we're motivated in exactly the same way. So I can rely on them and I can think about other things.
Absolutely. And that transparency to being willing to talk to them about it, I think already set you apart in lots of ways. So that's really good. Great. So one of the things that I wanted to finish on, Ed, was the idea that you've obviously had a very rich and varied career. You've got into a position where a lot of people, I think, themselves would want to be in. But no doubt at points in your career, you've had times when you've had frustrations, maybe setbacks, things that haven't gone the way that you wanted them to. And there's possibly a lot of people listening to this who are maybe going through those periods at the moment and trying to see what does it look like on the other side of that. Do you have any advice that you might be able to give for anyone going through maybe a tricky patch?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So I suppose the first thing I would recommend to do is to take ownership of whatever it is that's happened, or, whatever situation you find yourself in. And I don't necessarily mean take responsibility for that thing, because it might not even be your fault, but there's ways that you can think about what you might do differently to not get in that situation, or even if that's working with different people or changing the company that you're in because you don't like the way that things are done, or changing the company because you want to motivate yourself in a different way because you're not into what you're doing. I would then say, once you've taken responsibility for whatever it is to think about how you're going to do things differently next time, but also change in your mind what you think about that thing. So every single failure you have, and I can think of lots I've had in my career or things I've done that I'd like to do better, is think about what you're going to do next time and convert the whole thing into a positive. Without that experience, you don't know how you're going to deal with that experience. But once you've been through that, you'll come out the other side much stronger and a much more resilient person. That experience is value for you, and you're never at the end of that journey. So I mean, this always comes to my mind, but I've got two boys. I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and one of the stories that I read to them, I think it's called the Huggosaurus, or it's one of those ones. One of the final moments in the book it says it's not a happy ending. If it's not a happy ending, it hasn't ended yet. So if you're not in a good place, you haven't reached the end of that journey. Work through it, and you will reach a stage of coming out on the other side in a really positive environment, if you want to get there. So you've got to work hard to get there. And I would also say, whatever you go through, do be open and vulnerable and engaging with people that you know, particularly successful people. Because I've found whenever I've confided or sought advice from someone who's very successful, you'd be amazed at the stuff that they've been through. Lots of people have had huge things that have happened to them in their career. Not to use Elon Musk as an example of how to inspire someone for everything, but if you read about him and the things he's been through in his career, he's had some pretty momentous things that have happened and issues along the way. And he fights through them and then gets to the other side. And so the end story you see is not the journey along there, but there's a lot of stuff that go into someone's background. So I suppose something else to think in there is, don't think yourself as special. If you think that the world focuses around you and the thing that you're going through, then I don't think that empowers you to get to the other side, because you act like a victim. Try to take yourself out of that, work through it, have a goal that you can focus on, and go and get it, basically. Just get on with it, go and get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's helpful, isn't it, for people to recognize that there's no kind of cookie cutter career path, that actually you can go into something, you can realize, do you know what, I made a mistake here, this probably wasn't for me, or actually, this relationship isn't quite working out in this business context, so we probably need to do something different and move on. And it's what you do afterwards, I think, is the important thing, isn't it?
Yeah, no one is going to come and solve any of your issues or make your life better or make you achieve what you want to achieve. So so many people I see that I think, you're saying you want to do these things, and you look at other people that have made these successes, and for some reason you sort of feel that you haven't made these successes yet, you're doing absolutely nothing about it. You have to go and take ownership of these things, give yourself the chance to achieve what you want to achieve. If you don't give yourself the chance, you're not ever going to get anywhere. And for me, this is a very famous sort of perspective on it that people would always say, but I'd have much greater regret for something I had not achieved because I didn't try than something I tried and failed.
Yeah.
I wouldn't regret that at all. I tried and failed. You can be proud of that. And then you go to the next thing and you try harder at that and you learn from what you just did. But if you don't try, I don't have much sympathy for that, I have to say. So my empathy lacks for that. So yeah.
And no doubt, had you not done the same thing, you wouldn't be where you are now, and you wouldn't be on this really exciting journey with Sonora and the team and the backers that you've got. So yeah, that's testament, isn't it?
Absolutely. So I think for Eurazeo, we were probably one of the earliest investments they'd ever made. We didn't have any projects signed, we didn't have any land secured, but they backed us as a team and saw the conviction when we were presenting to them to believe that we could do what we said we were going to do, and we've proven it to them now. Which is a very nice position to be in, to be able to sit opposite them and go, see, we can do it. But people along that journey of even fundraising would say, and we spoke to even some fundraising agents who would say, we probably won't work with you yet until you've achieved this. And you sort of go, well, we can't achieve it without the money. So who's going to do it? But we spoke to one fundraising agent who also, like Eurazeo, spoke to us, and that's Opus, by the way, Opus Corporate Finance, spoke to us and believed in me and us as a management team and the concept. And so were willing to put their time behind us without a retainer. Huge risk, the amount of money, the amount of investment, time investment they put in as a business, because they also believed in us. So find people also, I would say, that critique you, but believe in you at the same time. If someone doesn't believe in you, you're unlikely to change that about them. If belief in you, get them to critique a concept, but don't surround yourself with people that aren't going to give you the motivation and excitement and passion to do what you want to do. Fortunately for us, Opus gave us that. As a management team, we gave each other that, and Eurazeo gave us that. They've said, we believe in you guys to do this, which is a great feeling to have someone behind you that says that.
Absolutely. And it sounds like there's going to be a lot to keep up with, a lot of interesting stuff coming out of the business. So thank you, Ed. We're looking forward to kind of looking on at that journey from afar. If people want to get in touch, if people want to talk about future opportunities with Sonora, if people want to just ask you any questions about some of the things that you said, what's the best way to do that?
Feel free to get in contact with me on LinkedIn, or you can email the main email address of the business, which is powerup@sonoraenergy.com.
Wonderful. And we'll put all of the links in the show notes so people can find that. But just left for me to say thank you very much, Ed. It's been great to chat through with you. Thank you very much for joining us again on this week's episode. And we look forward to chatting with you next time.